Hey everyone, it's the Kung Fu Genius, aka Alex Richter, and I just want to thank you all for your tremendous support here for this podcast, both in the audio format and on YouTube. If you're looking for an easy way to support this podcast, please consider joining the Kung Fu Genius Patreon. You can support for as little as $5 a month and get access to episodes a few days early. Higher levels of support will even get additional goodies, exclusive content, and even your name in the description. The baller level of support will give you the opportunity to be Dre for a day and give me a rest from this guy here. A link for the Kung Fu Genius Patreon page is in the description below. You can also support us by subscribing to the Kung Fu Genius on YouTube, liking this video, and sharing it on your social media platforms. And with that, let's get started.
All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be answering all sorts of hot nonsense from YouTube. Lots of gems, lots of taxi driving sifus, lots of, if you think the Shaolin Temple is real, you need self-help books, homie. Let's get to it.
He is unstoppable, unbeatable, unbelievable. He's Alex Richter, the Kung Fu Genius.
And every day, I practice martial arts. Watch out! Word is, I'm a Kung Fu genius. Practiced all day like a genius.
Yo, Dre, how you doing, man?
What's up, Sifu? I'm copacetic.
Everything good?
Yeah.
That's what's up. Here we are for another episode of the Kung Fu Genius.
Woo.
Here we are. We're going to do another Ask Me Anything episode as always. So
Okay.
what do you got for me?
Wow. You just always right to it. You can't even, lube it up.
You know, we can't even lube it up. You know, I realize, sometimes the idle chit-chat doesn't really work at the beginning of this episode. You know why? Because we're always 2-3 weeks ahead of when this episode comes out. So whatever cool talking point we have is
right.
crusty old by the time the episode comes out, right?
Like Will Smith.
Yeah,
Jada.
let me tell you about Will Smith slapping Chris Rock, which is already about 2 weeks old by the time we record this, but it'll be ancient by the time this episode comes out.
Damn.
So that's why it's hey, might as well just get right to it, man.
All right. So first off, out of the gate, we got Devin Harper.
All right, that was a smooth opening, by the way.
I'm trying to
I
get smoother and smoother,
Yeah, I
eating
know,
smooth
I know.
peanut butter.
Yeah, not that chunky stuff.
Hi. No, that wasn't smooth right there. Cut that. Hi, Sifu Alex.
Yeah.
Love your phone ringing like that. Long-time listener of the Dudes in KFG.
Thank you very much.
Really enjoy it and your recent wooden dummy book. I have some fun AMA fodder for you.
All right.
Number one, what is a Kung Fu master? Or more specifically, a Wing Chun master? Are you a Wing Chun master or a WT master?
Got it.
Damn.
All right.
Damn, Devin.
Well, that's a pretty direct question, all right? So, the question about things like titles like Master, and I'm going to leave the whole Grandmaster thing out of it because that's a whole can of worms on its own. I don't really like that title, all right? I don't like the title of Master. I don't... And maybe it sounds too much like I'm kind of copying Bruce Lee, but, I'm probably copying Bruce Lee. But the idea of, he once said in that phone conversation with Dan Lee, that he didn't like the word mature. He liked the word maturing. Because it's a process, right?
Yeah.
Something you never really quite get there.
Puts it in the present tense.
Yeah, and you're
instead
also a
of the
work in
past.
progress, right? So, wherever you are now, you would hope that in 5 years you are further along on that road or that path, right? So what I don't like about the word master is that it's, again, not sound too much like Bruce Lee, but it's like a crystallization, right? You have now achieved this thing, and it kind of almost sounds like an end product or an end position or an end goal. And when you're practicing martial arts or when you teach martial arts or you do martial arts or whatever your verb of martial arts is, I believe you should look at it like a continual process rather than I have achieved this rank or this level. And remember that things like rank and level and all of these different degrees and belts and ranking systems that martial arts have, these are more or less a modern construct, and they're definite benefits to that, especially when you teach martial arts professionally, in that they give students kind of bite-sized goals to kind of like work up to learning, more advanced program or to getting up to a certain level. Right. So there is a great motivational factor for giving people, some sign of recognition for having learned certain things. But of course, we all know that the downside of ranking systems is that there's a lot of abuse in ranking systems, meaning that, in certain styles or in certain schools, like levels can be bought. And I'm not just talking about Wing Chun. I mean, like any martial art that uses some kind of ranking system, right? And sometimes there are political considerations. These people get promoted, but these people don't because of these people have a closer relationship to the master or whatever, and these people don't. And sometimes, a lot of times these promotions can be political. And sometimes, on the other hand, sometimes ranking is just a money-making thing for some schools, and it's just a way to kind of, churn out more people, like in McDojos, like, everyone's a black belt kind of thing. So there definitely is a dark side to things like ranking systems and whatnot. And one of the things I would say is another dark side, besides all the obvious abuses of a ranking system, are these kind of titles like master, right? That when you are a such and such level, let's say in Wing Chun, it's usually a 5th level practitioner, then you are considered a master in Wing Chun. Another style, it might be a gold sash, and then you're a master. And in certain lines of traditional karate, it might be when you have the 5th dan.
That you are what level Master Baxter.
Master Baxter. He's actually a grandmaster, so he's got to be like
Grandmaster
8th, 9th, 10th level, something like that, right?
Right?
And so, of course, the thing is that different ranking systems are not like across the board the same. So, a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is not the same level of experience as a black belt in karate, right? You can get a black belt in karate, even a fairly tough karate style like Kyokushin, generally much faster than you can get a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt might actually be the equivalent in terms of time and experience to like a much higher Dan level of black belt in karate rather than just a plain old black belt, right? So ranking systems and things like that are not equivalent across the board. So then that brings us to the question, well, what does it then mean to be a master, or is this title even important, right? Now, I come from a Wing Chun lineage that used those titles, although we never actually called anyone a master. Sifu Leung Ting was very fond of Maso Yama, all right, which is actually a very interesting fact in and of itself.
Oh, yeah.
If you look at Sifu Leung Ting's book, Wing Chun Kun, which was the big book that he wrote in the 70s. It's kind of one of the pillars of 70s and 80s martial art books.
For some reason.
You don't have it? You should have it. I have like 4 different copies of it in English, and I have like 2 or 3 foreign language editions of it, plus the Chinese version, which is actually in 2 parts. And it's interesting how different countries translated different things. So, but when you have spent a little time with Sifu Leung Ting, he does mention Maso Yama every now and again. And Maso Yama, not only was he the founder of Kyokushin Kai karate, which is a type of full contact karate. He was a bit of an iconoclastic person who went against tradition a little bit and believed that, they should focus more on sparring, although he also still had kata and a lot of the traditional trappings of Japanese and Okinawan martial arts. But he believed in full contact fighting and testing your abilities and hard training. But he also was a pretty organized person in terms of organizing his system, like with the levels and the belts and so on and so forth. And he wrote a few books in the 60s and 70s. And those books have become kind of classics of karate and Kyokushin in particular. Sifu Leung Ting's book, Wing Chun Kun, is very clearly a copy of Maso Yama's This is Karate. When you look at them side by side, it's kind of like this is the authoritative book on karate, and Leung Ting in the mid to late 70s, wanted to write like an authoritative book on Wing Chun, which would be like an overview on the style, an overview on the forms, the methods, the history, kind of like an all-in-one type book,
so
right?
Borrowed the template.
He borrowed the template, but Sifu Leung Ting was also one of the first, if not the first, Wing Chun teacher to really adopt a formal ranking system. And I'm not here to litigate whether ranking systems are good or bad. They definitely, if you're teaching professionally and you want to teach things step by step, a ranking system can be very valuable. If you're just teaching a couple, like people, you don't need a ranking system. You're teaching a couple people in your basement. I mean, you don't need a ranking system for that. You don't even need a phone number for that, okay? So, the problem is at what level are you teaching? When people kind of condemn ranking systems or formalization or whatever, normally those are people who just are training with a couple other dudes. And if that's what you're doing, yeah, of course you don't need those things. But teach Wing Chun to a school of 50, 100, 200 people and show me how it's done without standardizing stuff. And then I want to see that school burn to the ground in 2 months, okay? So by having standards, and you can have a curriculum. And, of course, you can modify that according to different tastes and things like that. But essentially, a good ranking system should be just a standardization of the curriculum. And all a ranking system is that you have learned a portion of that curriculum, and you can do it to a certain degree of competency. That doesn't necessarily mean that you are like an undefeatable fighter because you've learned this program or you learned the Buji or whatever. The ranking system is just like you have learned this, and the ranking system is just acknowledging that you have learned that you put in the time and you have some level of competency in it. And part of the reason why Wing Chun in particular, in my opinion, and I know a lot of people can disagree with me on this, and I'm fine, I'll still sleep at night with no problems, is that there was no ranking system in Wing Chun, right? So there was no standardization of the program. Yes, you begin with the Sunam Tao and learn single arm Chi Sao and progressive double arm and then learn the Chum Kyu and so on and so forth. But without a ranking system and standardization, that is why you have so much contention between the different Wing Chun schools in terms of what do you teach, when do you teach it, is this Wing Chun, is that not Wing Chun? Whereas they don't necessarily have those problems as much in even hardcore styles like Kyokushin, because they have a standardized ranking program. So having a standardized ranking system doesn't mean that you have sold out, all right? Look, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has a ranking system. Now, it's not always standardized among all Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu schools, but still, that's a ranking system that is supposed to stand for quality. Why Chinese Kung Fu people think they can't do the same thing. They automatically assume that a ranking system is just selling out or selling ranks or whatever. Look at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and of course you can always find examples of abuse, but for the most part, they have a high level of integrity with the ranking system, as do some other martial arts styles. So in Masoyama's book, he kind of describes his ranking system, and you have, once you become a black belt, you have first dan, second dan, third dan, and by the time you're a fifth dan, I believe, okay, and I'm not an expert in Kyokushin Kai, but then you are essentially considered like a master once you're a fifth dan. You're not a master when you're a black belt, you're a master when you're like a fifth dan. And that is, in Leung Teng, not just taking Masoyama's example for his book, but he also took it for his ranking system. So the 12 student levels, that's not necessarily based on a belt ranking system. That's just based on a division of 12. Like it's academic, like you have 12 grades, right? And then his higher level ranking system, like for the technician levels, which would be the equivalent of a black belt, I suppose, is somewhat based on Masoyama's Dan ranking system, which is, from what I understand, not particular to Masoyama. Other karate systems use a similar one. And so the first 4 levels, Sifu Leung Ting called a technician, which is essentially like the first 4 Dan levels of a black belt. And then when you became a 5th level, you were no longer a technician. You were what's called a practitioner, or a practician in Leung Ting's Chinglish. And that meant that you are now a master. That means you have internalized the art to a certain degree, but then you can be a 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th level master, right? And then after that, the 9th and the 10th, those are the grandmaster levels reserved for whoever, technically whoever the 10th level is supposed to be the current head of the school, of the style, let's say in this case Leung Ting Wing Chun, and the 9th level is supposed to be the successor. All right, and then the 11th is when he retired, and 12th is posthumous after you're dead or whatever, right? Then you get that posthumously, right? So we always used to make jokes about all these like German guys who would quit the EWTO and then give themselves grandmaster titles, and we say, why don't they just go all the way for the 12th level, right? But anyway, that's the basic idea. So like, 11th level is like you're retired, 12th level is posthumous, but 10th is supposed to be the current grandmaster, 9 is supposed to be the successor, and then 8th is like the highest level of master before you are in the grandmaster level. But the one person who had a really hard time adhering to the ranking system that he created was Leung Ting himself. And so he jumbled up the whole grandmaster thing a little bit with this should only be a 1/9 level who should be the successor to the grandmaster, right? And then he maybe changed his mind about those things later on. That might have been his idea when he first started, but then eventually he changed it, and then and that caused some issues later, right? So anyway, back to the original question. So if you're a 5th level practitioner in Wing Chun, you should have at least 15 years of experience in Wing Chun or more. Usually it takes people a little bit longer, but let's say 15 years, unless you are phenomenally skilled or talented or work hard. I mean, of course, it depends. There are people who've done it much quicker, but that would mean you put about 15 years into it. And if those are hard training years, and you have experience, and then it's obviously understood that you should have a certain degree of mastery in that skill, the ability to apply it at will or apply it effectively. But that's not a guarantee. I still don't like that title because, again, that title is very loaded with imagery of, even though it's master, but imagery of grandmasters and people with supernatural abilities or,
or they can DJ really good.
Yeah, exactly. So I think traditional martial arts people should stop using that title, because oftentimes Sifu is translated as master. It's even translated in a lot of Chinese books. Like if you look up the term Sifu in a Chinese word book, sometimes it might say master. Okay, but I actually don't find that an accurate translation of the title. So Sifu, there are 2 types of Sifu, the Chinese characters, right? And by the way, a very long time ago, like 2020, I did a series of videos before I started the Kung Fu Genius podcast, where I talked about like the titles like Dai Sifu and Sifu and the Kung Fu family tree. And if you're new to this channel and you have not watched those, you can find like if you watch the Not So Complicated
breakdown,
Kung Fu family tree, where I actually break down all of these things. So I don't want to sound too repetitive, especially for people who followed me for a while. But there are two Fu characters in when you say Sifu, right? And so Sifu, the first Fu character, can mean like an expert. Okay, like so it means someone who is an expert in a blue collar trade. So you don't use the term Sifu for scholarly pursuits. Like if someone were a teacher, usually you say Lo Si or Lao Shi in Mandarin, right? Like that means teacher. You don't use that term for Kung Fu instructors. Because Kung Fu is not considered a white collar scholarly pursuit. It's considered blue collar, right? Oh. And the other people who might use the title Sifu are like a chef or a taxi driver.
Okay.
So when you're in Hong Kong and you're in a taxi, you can call the taxi driver Sifu, right? That doesn't mean that they're your martial arts Sifu. That means that they're an expert in taxi driving, which is a blue collar job, right? Which is why we think it's funny when like non-Chinese people get the Sifu title in their respective martial art, and then they think that this title means that they're some kind of like super special person. It's like, yeah, bro, it just means you know enough of your martial arts style to start helping other people, right? But get in line. You're a Sifu behind the chef, the taxi driver, the blacksmith, all these other guys, right?
You can get them around town.
Yeah, exactly.
You
so,
know enough.
So that's the one meaning of Fu, all right, which can mean like an expert, right? And so that is essentially a title for someone who is an expert in a blue collar trade and may teach it to others, but not necessarily. Like a chef is not necessarily teaching his trade to other people, but you could still call them a Sifu, right? And then there's another Fu character, which means father. And when you put these two side by side, it's essentially the same pronunciation. So even some Chinese people get these characters confused. Wow. The second one means father, and that is the version you would use for your own personal teacher. All right, because then you're calling them like it's almost like Kung Fu father, although it always sounds kind of culty. But I prefer the term mentor. All right, I think mentor takes the cultiness out of it. Like people say, "You're my kung fu father." It's like, no, man, your father's at home. I'm not your father. Okay, you can say I'm your kung fu father if you call me Sifu, but I prefer mentor. I think is a much better term for it, even if it doesn't mean exactly the same. I think the sentiment of a mentor or a coach is better than that kind of, all right, you are my sworn disciple and you have to listen to everything I say and you're not allowed to have a brain and think your own thoughts, right? There was a Wing Chun instructor in Vienna, not part of the EWTO, but part of a rebel organization, and I taught one of his students many years ago, and he was very culty, and he is still very culty, and he allowed his assistant to teach a class, which was like a big deal because he likes to control everything. And he even told the student, you're allowed to use your own words to teach the class. Which is kind of like, oh my God.
What?
Like, yeah, I mean, so that's like the weird culty shit that drives me nuts about some of these titles and things like that.
Use your own words.
Yeah, use your own words. In other words, you don't have to just explain it the way I would explain it. You could even use some of your own thoughts. So you have a martial arts instructor in a free country telling another adult male, you're allowed to use your. I'm giving you permission to use your own thoughts when you combine words to teach other people. All right.
Oh wow, dude.
Which is ridiculous, right? So obviously when these titles like master and these things have a lot of weird shit attached to them, and that's why I don't like them. So. If you look at the term Sifu as like the father character, I think if you look at that as the term mentor, then I think that's a much better way of looking at it. And then if you look at the term Sifu, the other one, which would normally mean like an expert, in Chinese martial arts, I think the best way to translate that would be coach. So you can, once you become a Sifu, a coach, you can take on your own personal students, which will then call you mentor.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean, but people who don't learn from you wouldn't call you mentor, they would call you coach, for example, right? And those two sound the same, and people get that confused. In theory, although even in Hong Kong, they don't always adhere to it. If someone is a Sifu, but not your Sifu, you shouldn't just call them Sifu. If someone is your personal Sifu, right? Like this is the person who adopted you into their martial arts school. You just call them Sifu. You don't call them Sifu in their name.
Yeah.
Because you're not using Sifu as a title, you are calling them Sifu.
Yeah, I would
like
never call you Sifu Alex.
Yeah, it's weird, right?
Yeah.
But you might say that if you were talking about me to someone who was not my student, right? And that's the way it's supposed to be. So I always find it weird when people come up to me who are not my students, but they learn from someone else, so they do have a Sifu, and they're like, "Oh, Sifu, it's so nice to meet you." And like this, look at the back of my mind, I'm kind of like oh, no. I'm always worried, like if their Sifu is here, their Sifu will get upset. Right, you know what I mean? Now, of course, the joke is most Westerners don't know about that. So it's a mistake they make, and even their own Western Sifus don't know that that's a mistake, so it usually goes under the radar, right? Damn. So in general, if you meet a Sifu who is not your Sifu, you should call them Sifu and their name. And if they are your personal Sifu, which would mean usually it's only one person, then you just call them Sifu, right? Now, that is a general rule. Of course, different schools are different, all right? Like in Hong Kong, they might have different ideas about that. But whether you call someone coach, so-and-so, or you call someone, mentor or whatever, those don't really mean master, even though they sometimes get translated that way, all right? And I know that, even I have some Cantonese word books. You look up the title or the word Sifu, and then it'll say master, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's just one possible way of looking at it. But I don't like the term master because it just seems like an end product, and it seems like, okay, you are now a master, now you're done. And you're never done with martial arts. You're never done getting better, right? You can have a high level of skill. You can be a really good teacher, but you still want to become more skillful, and you still want to be a better teacher. So what is the bar for being a master, right? And do you have to be the best fighter to be a master in a martial art? There are too many variables. And this is a problem that only exists in English. Because in Hong Kong, when you call someone Sifu, you're basically either calling them coach or you're just calling them an expert. And if you can be an expert in something, doesn't mean you're a master of it. You understand what I'm saying? Like
Okay.
I have expertise in this field. All right, but that doesn't mean that like the level of mastery is so high that it's beyond question, or that there are not other people out there who are way better than me, or something like that, right? So I think that title just needs to die. And when people call me Master Richter, like they use the English, I'm very uncomfortable with that. I don't like it. There's too much negative shit attached to that word. I just don't like it. Damn. Yeah, and it's one step down from Grandmaster, a title I'm not fond of at all. So I think just if you're a Sifu, just be content with being a Sifu. And if you don't like Chinese terms, have your students call you coach. And if you don't like that, then just have them call you by your name. Whatever you do in your school is fine. Because anytime I talk about this stuff, people are like, well, in my school, we don't even use titles. I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'm not telling you you're wrong for not using that stuff. Just if you're going to use it, you should use it correctly.
All right.
Right? Then sometimes people realize they're using stuff incorrectly, and then they just double down and go, oh, this stuff's not important. I'm not Chinese anyway. Okay, but if you're going to use it, you should use it right.
All right.
All right? All right, next question.
Well, I'm curious about something. I used to have, when I trained JKD, I had another Sifu.
Uh-huh. So what are you saying?
If I run, if I run into him, I should not call him Sifu anymore, right? And this is a
that's
weird thing.
Well,
for
see,
me.
I mean, this is the conflict between traditional Chinese culture and modernity. Because when a lot of these rules were established, and these things are cultural, and these things are continually progressing, even in Hong Kong. I mean, like these things have also changed over time a little bit too. Remember, in the old days, let's say in the Qing Dynasty, if you were going to learn martial arts, I mean, at that time you were living in an agrarian society. There wasn't a whole lot to do. There wasn't
farming,
20. There wasn't
It's
20
farming.
different Sifus for you to choose from.
Yeah.
You're gonna learn a little bit from this guy, and when you get bored with this guy, you go to the other side of Fatzan and go learn from this other guy, right? And in Chinese culture, because these rules about you have one Sifu, and then your Sifu's your Sigong, and everyone who started before you under the same Sifu, there your Siheng or Sijie or whatever. This is based on Confucian ideals and ancestor worship and the kind of very patriarchal structure of Chinese culture. And so that is just an immediate reflection of the normal family rules you would have at home, just applied into a Kung Fu family setting. So you have, if you are accepted into a Kung Fu school at that time, that was a big deal because most of the Sifus didn't really teach openly, so they could hand select their students. So if you were picked to learn from a Sifu, that was a big deal. It wasn't easy in many respects to get picked by a Sifu. So if that Sifu finally adopted you, you weren't going to muck around and do anything to get kicked out, all right? And so you followed that Sifu basically for the rest of their lives. So you had only one Sifu. If you finally got accepted into a school after like doing everything and then doing a Baisi ceremony and swearing loyalty to your Sifu or whatever, only to 3 years later start learning from someone else, I mean, that would be a major insult to your own character to do something like that, right? Because one, they didn't have that many things to do, so I don't think there weren't that many options. And two, that went totally against the idea of Chinese culture. You have one Sifu. You don't have multiple Sifus. Now, I know in modern culture, that's a little bit different. Even in Hong Kong, there are some people who have different Sifus. And what you find with this one Sifu rule, all right, is most Chinese Kung Fu instructors will tell you that you only have one Sifu. And if you jump to another Sifu, they consider that a lack of character, a lack of ethics. If you jump to another Sifu within the same style, they consider that super shady. If you jump to a Sifu who's a higher generation than your current Sifu, they look at that as like, Of course, they're not putting any shade on the second Sifu who adopted you. The blame all goes on the student somehow, right?
Okay.
Now, look, are there examples of that? Yeah, of course. I mean, even modern examples. Wan Kam Leung, very famous student of Wong Se Leung, but was originally Leung Seung's student beforehand. Leung Teng first started learning from Leung Seung, later started learning from Yip Man, although Leung Teng always called Yip Man Si Gong. He never called him Sifu, contrary to popular belief. So, but there are even modern examples of people who learn from this guy and then later learn from that guy. So do they have two Sifus, right? And what you find is that most people will justify that in their own case. You know, they might say, okay, in general, you only have one sifu. You don't have multiple sifus. All right? But if they themselves have had more than one sifu, yeah, well, okay. In my situation, this is what happened.
Yeah, in
all right?
my situation.
Yeah, so what you always
young,
find,
and
yeah.
then I became older.
So even among Chinese, you will find that, like, if it applies to them or someone they know or someone they care about, they will tell you the specific circumstances why so-and-so or they themselves have more than one sifu. And they'll excuse it in themselves, while in general not excusing it out there, right? So in some cases, someone might practice different types of martial arts. So you might have a Wing Chun sifu, and then maybe also learn Tai Chi, and you have a Tai Chi sifu, okay? In the old days, that would have been frowned down upon, but nowadays that's generally accepted as okay. So then sometimes Wing Chun sifus might get multiple sifus of different Wing Chun lineages and say, well, this is my sifu in Yip Man Wing Chun and this one here, and then they get around there. But if you really look at it, it's actually not correct in Chinese culture. Now, that's a completely different question as to whether that's a problem in reality, all right? I mean, if people want to learn from multiple instructors and learn from different lineages and sifus, that in 2022 should be everyone's right to learn and do whatever the hell they want in terms of martial arts.
Right, if you can afford it.
Okay, if you can afford it, why not, right? And we live in a much more open society in terms of information and exchange and all that kind of stuff, right? That these super conservative attitudes just really don't fit anymore, right? But you can't say that that's absolutely correct in Chinese culture. That's a separate issue. So I get it, all right? Multiple students from all over the world who have a sifu and maybe have had a falling out with them or they don't like what their sifu is teaching them. They also come to New York and learn from me, right? But I don't let them call me sifu. I still adhere to that. All right?
Interesting.
Yeah, they can call me Sifu Alex because I am a Sifu but not their Sifu. But because they learned from me, if they just call me Sifu, I said, no, your Sifu is this person. Yeah. And even if their relationship is not good with their Sifu or former Sifu, I said, they're still your Sifu. So I have no problem teaching them. So I've kind of blended both, all right? Okay. I'll teach you, all right? But if I'm not your Sifu, don't call me Sifu. Just because I think that's just not correct. All right? If we're going to follow those terms to any degree, then we should have some basic standardization of that. Like,
yeah,
you have
in my
one
case,
Sifu.
I had a hard reset.
Yeah, so I mean, the problem is,
reset.
okay, you had learned Jeet Kune Do before, now you learn Wing Chun. So, did you have a Sifu? So most modern people say you have a Jeet Kune Do Sifu and you have a Wing Chun Sifu, all right? And then that's how they're able to separate, right? Although if it were the 50s in Hong Kong, they would be, oh, you bunto, you rebel, right?
Bunto.
Yeah, you're a bunto, right?
Oh man, All right,
what do we got?
Next up, we got Andrew Lin.
Andrew Lin, I've heard of that guy before.
Yeah, he's pretty known in the camping world.
He's aight.
His question is, I often see people on social media trashing certain technique demonstrations, saying they aren't realistic or practical. Usually, it's something ridiculous. But at the same time, there are lots of legitimate techniques that take lots of training to be able to apply. How does one know the difference between a technique not working in application versus you simply not being able to do the technique, especially when they're coming from an outside perspective?
Right. Oh, that's a great question, and that's a big problem now in social media where, people are posting things that they do, and then you go, oh, it wouldn't work in a real fight, right?
Like that dude who, was he, from Chicago? He's showing all that gun stuff.
Oh,
is he from Chicago?
Yeah, that self-defense guy, right? Yeah.
He got big real quick.
He did get big real quick, right? Yeah. And a lot of the stuff he showed is kind of weird and crazy, right?
People started clowning him, yep.
Okay, so I mean, the thing with that is that context is king, all right? And so there's a saying in Chinese that a half bucket makes the most noise, all right? And so if you are someone that doesn't know anything about what, let's say you don't know anything about martial arts or self-defense, and you see a self-defense demonstration, some, like the stuff you see on Instagram, if someone's holding onto someone's throat and then you see that person do some kind of movement to dissolve it, right? You don't know anything, you go, oh, cool. Like you don't know, right?
All right.
And then you become an actual expert in martial arts. And you look at something like that, and you either go, I could see where that could work, or you go, I don't think that would work under stress. But either way, you don't squawk about it because you are an expert and you are confident in what you know, and you don't need to go out there and be like, yeah, it's a bunch of bullshit. But what makes the most noise? A half bucket full of water.
Oh,
it
man.
swirls around and knocks around and makes a bunch of noise.
Swishing,
An
splashing.
empty bucket makes no noise.
Yeah.
The person who doesn't know anything, because they're just like, well. And the expert, a full bucket, also doesn't make any noise. It's all the half buckets that kind of know something, or what's usually the case, they have a little bit of training in one style, and whatever they're looking at is not the way their style does it. Now, I will admit, there's a fair amount of self-defense crap on, let's just say, Instagram, all right?
Okay.
Where people are showing, like, someone grabs you, like, here, and you go around, do this, and do this, and do this, all right? Where I go, I don't know if under stress and pressure, if you're able to do something this complicated, but maybe with a lot of training, you can make that work.
Okay. Repetition.
But either way, when I see some stuff that I think is kind of questionable, like I look at that and I like it's something like, I don't know how someone would pull that off. The last thing I do is comment on it. Oh, this is total bullshit. This would never work. First of all, again, I'm saying, like, do you think
you're like that full bucket?
Yeah, but well, I mean, do you think?
Wow.
No, I'm an empty bucket. Trust me. Do you think that you're going to correct someone in the comments in real time? And I know I'm sounding like a broken record. I talked about this recently, but everything in life is a cost-benefit analysis. All right, you are coming in and saying this thing doesn't work, and do you think the person who made that video is going to read your comment and go, you know what? That's a well-reasoned argument. I'm going to take this video down and I'm going to go learn something else.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
The number of people like who kind of write comments where they're trying to like correct you, not just in martial arts stuff, like even here on the Kung Fu Genius channel, right? I'll write like, Bruce Lee death conspiracies that make no sense.
Oh, yeah.
And someone will write like, yeah, Bruce Lee died this way here. Like they'll just chime in like as if, and they haven't seen the video yet because the video hasn't premiered. And then they'll say something like that. And then I'll be like, well, it's settled then. I'm going to take this video down. I always say that. It's one of my favorite comments. And of course, the video always stays up.
Oh, no.
So the thing is like, look, you see something that you think is bullshit and you see something you think that doesn't work. Why the hell do you care? Do you care because you look at that video has 2 million views and you go, wow, 2 million people now are going to use this thing in self-defense.
Big platform.
All right. Again, what are you pissed off? The big platform. And then when you go there, this thing would never work in real fight. The guy would just punch you with his other hand. All right? What's the outcome going to be? All right? The people who agree with you are going to go like, yeah, man, you're totally right. And then you do that for stroking your own ego, for that dopamine high of people telling you that you're great. And then the other people can say, no, man, this totally works and I use this or whatever. And then you go and what? The video's still up. You keep commenting back and forth, which helps the algorithm of the video that you hate. And more people are going to watch it. And at the end of the day, probably the person who has those 2 million views on that video isn't even reading your comments because there are thousands of comments and they don't care. And what is triggering you? The fact that they have a bigger social media preference, platform, I should say? Probably. The fact that someone does something in a different way than you do it? Yeah, probably pissing you off. Or is it the fact that you wish that the thing you did, everyone else did that and there was no other version of it? It's probably a combination of all those three. And so that means that you give way too much of a fuck. And you need to stop giving a fuck. All right? And get a life. All right? So that's the first thing I would say about people who comment on that kind of stuff. The other thing I'm going to say is some of those techniques, it's all contextual and it all depends on what you train. So for example, if someone grabs your throat, okay, in Wing Chun, we might have a much shorter response where we just do like a quick movement, maybe to strip the hand off our neck and punch the guy in the face, or boom, you do a quick kick, or you roll the grab with your shoulder and then hit the guy, something super short. But another style, and you see this a lot on Instagram, might grab the arm, wrap the other arm over, do that wrap, and then a throw, which takes some coordination and some time, and it's a few more movements. Now, if you don't practice this thing a lot, you most likely won't be able to pull that off. But if you were doing this thing every day, all the time, and this thing hypothetically happened to you, you might get it to work. But you might not. But either way, it depends on how well have you trained it, and can you do it under stress. And that you don't know when you're just looking at a technique by itself, all right? Like I look at some Aikido stuff that Seagal does, and I go, some of that looks cool, some of that looks totally crazy. And some of that looks like, yeah, it could work, but you have to really practice that a lot in order to get it to work. So the question is, if we're practicing a martial art where we're more concerned about like, oh, I just want to learn how to defend punches or do chi sao, or I'm just doing it for fun, how much time are you going to invest in throat grab defense? All right, you should do it. You should have an idea of what to do, but it's all how much are you going to do it? Now, some styles out there, that's all they teach, how to get out of these different holds, and maybe they can do stuff other people can't because that's all they do. All right? And so that's another thing. And I'll never forget when Tom DeBlas, who's a famous high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy, I invited him here to City Wing Chun to do like just a small 1 hour, 2 hour workshop with my students.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, can we maybe do some clinch stuff? And he was like, yeah, sure. So he used me as his partner. We're doing like some half clinch stuff. And then he was showing like how you put your hand on the person's elbow and keeping your arm tight, how you roll and turn and kind of wrench the guy's arm off and back away, which is actually the same thing we teach as one of it's a part of our wooden dummy program with the anti-neck pull, right? When you get caught and you can't get that neck pull off, you kind of move the shoulder this way here and you use your body, right? In Wing Chun, when we do it, we might stay close and then continue doing our chi sao. When he did it, he popped it off and he got space and then he re-engaged. But the technique was the same. And I remember when he showed it, like all my senior students who had learned that technique in Wundami, they all looked at me like, wow, he's doing it, right? Now, if Tom DeBlas shows that technique in a video, all right, because he's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy and had fought in UFC and Bellator, people go like, oh, yeah, okay. But guarantee you, even if he shows that on his page, there'll be dudes going, yo, man, that would never work, man. If you do that, I'll just do that, blah, 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 blah. And he's freaking Tom DeBlas, all right? But what he showed was actually the same thing that I teach my students in the same situation, right? Now, that's not to say that everything he teaches is the same as what I teach. Obviously not. I'm Wing Chun. He does Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But there it was. But he showed it as an isolated technique.
All right.
So we just started in that position. So I'm already holding on to him because he's demonstrating a technique. And then he shows, how to do this kind of pop off with your hand and back away, right? But that's not done under the stress of a real fighting situation. And that was quite literally like, okay, if someone grabs your head like this, so he's showing me how to set it up, which is how most techniques are taught. Okay, if you do this, then this is what I would do. All right. And that's how you learn the movement. And then later you put that under a little bit of pressure testing. And then eventually that technique might happen in free sparring when you don't expect it. And then you have to recall that reaction. That's kind of the 3-step process to learning everything, right? You got to understand what you're trying to do. You got to practice slowly and correctly. And then later you add speed, power, intensity, or the chaos of doing it in a real fight, right? But when Tom DeBlas was showing this anti-clinch technique to my students for the first time, we just start in this position and then he does it. But if you were a kung fu person and you said, and you just had someone grab your neck and you did literally the same thing, but it's totally bullshit because the guy grabs you, right? And because they're looking at a technique done in isolation. And techniques done in isolation are done for demonstration or teaching purposes. All right. Okay. And then everyone does that. When you see a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu technique shown on Instagram, usually the professor, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructor will say, okay, here I am in this type of mount position, and then he pushes me here, and then I go and I put him in an arm lock, and they show the steps, and then maybe he does it a little bit quicker. But he was not showing that under sparring pressure. He's demonstrating and showing the movement. Okay. And no one says anything because it's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? Of course, obviously, there are videos where you could see it in live time and so on and so forth. But if you are not from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Thai boxing and you show any technique in a technical step-by-step manner, the way they show it in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Thai boxing, then suddenly it's fake because the other guy's not really fighting you. And it's like, no, bro, this is just a technical demonstration of something. All right. And so I thought that was like really interesting when I saw that. Like he was showing techniques in the same kind of level of intensity, step-by-step ways we would teach anything. But if you put that on a video, the perception would be different based on who the person doing it was and who the audience is. So that's all I got to say about that topic.
All right.
Hey Kung Fu Genius listeners, are you a fan of Wing Chun Kung Fu? Well, if you listen to me, I assume you are. I got great news for KFG fans. Right now, you can get an all-access 1-month free trial subscription to Wing Chun Illustrated magazine. Yes, I said free. Go to WCINewsstand.com and register in the upper right-hand corner. Fill out your email and password and use the code KFG Trial to get your free trial to all the issues from 2011 to the current issue. That's right, all the issues, even the one with this cool guy on the cover. That's me for those of you listening to us on audio. My Kung Fu Genius column is also in all the new issues, as if you needed another reason to get this awesome magazine. Go get your free trial subscription today. For all that information, check out the description below. And now back to me.
Wowzers. Jamie Cavazos.
I'll take your word for it.
All right. Jamie Cavazos says, great video.
Not sure which one, but I'll take that.
I'm not sure which one either.
At a certain age, you take any compliment you get. You don't even care if it's legit or aimed at you. All right?
He could be talking about some
You could be talking about one of
DVD from
Beardy's videos. Yeah. I'll
All
take
right.
it.
What do you think about Shi Yanming, a Shaolin monk in New York?
Xian Ming was a Shaolin performer from China who came in the early 90s, I believe. John Leung from Seattle and Chun Pui from Orlando. They invited the Shaolin team from China to come and tour the U.S. And of course, Shaolin monks, has to be understood in China, especially in the 90s and the 80s. These were essentially wushu practitioners. So they are practicing a form of Chinese martial arts that's performance-based as opposed to function-based. All right, that's why in China, when they wanted to have kind of a more practical or more effective form of martial art, they created sanda, the kickboxing, which is a very powerful and very effective martial art, because the kung fu that they were teaching was essentially just performance kung fu. It was taking the traditional forms and adding some ideas from gymnastics and performance and acrobatics in there, and doing everything with floppy swords so that it's not real swords, it's not real fighting, but so everything could be done faster and in a more showy kind of way. So wushu in Mandarin, which actually just means martial arts. It's funny because when you hear the term wushu, you think of like Chinese martial art practitioners in silk pajamas doing fancy jumps and spins and kicks and crazy stuff with swords and different weapons. But the term wushu itself just means martial arts. But that is not really, it's a performance art as opposed to a practical fighting art.
All right.
So in the 80s, when they suddenly found the Shaolin Temple, surprise, surprise, after they realized that you can make money with Chinese martial arts, the Chinese government magically found and restored the Shaolin Temple.
Oh, nice.
And it also coincided with the movie Shaolin Temple with Jet Li coming out. And now suddenly, oh yeah, you can come to the cradle of Chinese martial arts, because all martial arts in the world come from Shaolin Temple. You know, everyone got along fine. No one ever had to fight in the entire long history of this planet until peaceful Buddhist monks realized you could punch and kick each other in the face. And then suddenly the greatest export was not peace and Buddhism. It was punches and kicks and weapons.
So Buddhist monks invented fighting.
Yeah. All right. If you follow the logic of most Chinese Kung Fu people, Buddhist monks, well, technically Damo, an Indian monk, who taught them breathing techniques. And from those breathing techniques, they're like, but we can also punch and kick people. All right. And then finally, at that moment, for the first time in the history of the entire world, organized violence was practiced. Man. All right. But before then, it was all just kumbaya and milkshakes. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So anyway, the monk performers in the 80s and 90s were just wushu performers with a shaved head. These were essentially paid by the tourism board of China to entertain tourists and do demonstrations and all that kind of stuff, like breaking spears on the throat, all these tricks I can debunk in 10 minutes and all this stuff, these feats of Qigong or whatever. And Xian Ming was on that initial tour that came to the States. Later, they did lots of tours. I even saw one of them. I don't remember if it was in Seattle or Germany, but I saw one of the Shaolin monk tours. And you know, they perform all their wushu forms, and they usually bring out some. Seattle? I don't remember. I saw one of the shows, but I don't remember where it was.
Jersey?
No. I don't remember. It doesn't matter.
All
They're
right.
all the same. They're just performing wushu and then these fake qigong things, and they usually bring out some kid who spins on a spear on his stomach. It's like the same show. They're all performers, all right. And Xian Ming came on that first tour from China. And of course, they had an escort from China to keep an eye on the performers. And Xian Ming, in the middle of the night, ran from his hotel and defected. And then eventually came to New York
AWOL.
and then opened the Shaolin Temple USA. And then later got to the chance to teach all these, RZA and all the members of the Wu-Tang Clan. And his school was like a big scene back in the day. I know that he moved his school. I don't know how big he is now. But like there was a time when he was like, it was, you can imagine all the rich people in Soho like, I'm doing Kung Fu from the 34th generation Shaolin monk. He's the real deal. I'm learning at the Shaolin Temple USA. It's on Broadway. It's very exclusive. It's right across the street from my yoga school. I always get a smoothie before I go. Right, okay.
Right.
That was like the cool
the
shit
thing.
in the
That was the
90s or
scene.
whatever. But I don't know. I don't know what's become. I've had a few students
Yeah.
that trained here who trained there before, and they told me some stories. But
Oh, no.
that's for a private podcast.
All
right.
Patreons? Ah, man.
Maybe.
Ah.
If the Patreon supporters want to know of the stuff, these extra stories I've heard, not just about this, but just in general, yeah, that's for Patreons. That's not for public YouTube.
Oh, no.
All right. Also, I don't like, and it's not nothing negative. I'm just saying I've just heard lots of stuff, but again, these involve people who are still around. These are technically my competitors, so then it's nothing bad. It's nothing bad. It's just that people told me these stories, and I don't want to just go and tell stories out of school.
Blur
You know
them
what I
out.
mean? Like,
Gotcha. All right, moving right along. We have Chris.
Chris.
Chris. I'm not sure which Chris it is.
We got lots of Chris's.
Yeah,
Everybody hates Chris Rock.
everybody.
All right.
Hi, KFG. Looking forward to it. Also, I don't know what he means by looking forward to it. But I guess he's looking forward to something.
Sometimes people put that comment before the premiere of the episode is up, so the episode hasn't come out yet.
He's looking forward to it.
It's a pre-comment.
All right. Also, I had a question after listening to last week's. I remember you mentioning a few times that you like to read the books that Bruce read to try to get an idea into his mind. What are your thoughts on Bruce's reading on self-help books and the like? I know you touched on Jiddu Krishnamurti. I know I botched it, but who cares? And Bruce's chief definite aim. Any thoughts on Bruce's mindset on reading so much self-help literature, and were there any that helped you?
That's a great question.
Is it?
Yeah, it is a great question because self-help is a big problem in the world. All right, there
wow.
are people who are addicted to self-help. All right,
man.
and I
don't
know
know
a
if
number.
I'm one of those, but-
I know a number of these people,
Yeah?
right? Because the truth is, at least in my experience, we all have stuff that we're struggling with, all right? For some people, it's laziness or procrastination or lack of confidence, or people feel like they just don't have the wherewithal to start a business or whatever. Like, whatever it is.
suffering all of those.
Yeah, it could, yeah. And,
basket.
but usually, it's all the same root. That's the thing. And a good self-help book will not tell you how to solve those individual problems. They'll tell you or teach you how to fix the problem that's making you not figure out how to solve those problems. And that's the reason why most people fail when they read self-help. Because the good self-help books are telling you, okay, you don't need self-help books. You need to get this idea into your head or this idea out of your head. And if you can do that, you don't need self-help books. You just need to go and do what you need to do. And people sometimes don't see that. And they go, okay, this book says I need to write stuff down and write my goals And but I'm not quite sure about that. And then they go and they read another book that tells them you got to do this. And then there's another book says you got to wish on a star and think about this thing every day until it becomes true, right? And what happens is they keep reading more and more self-help, and it's not making them better. It's giving them a complex, because now you don't have one strategy to improve your life. You have 9 that are not always congruent with each other. So that is a big problem. And it's not just, you can read online that there are people who are literally addicted to self-help and their lives are a mess. And there was a point, like in my early 20s when I started running my own business, where I was reading nothing but self-help books. Everything from business to business motivation to all sorts of stuff, right? And there was some stuff out there that was really helpful, and there was some stuff that was super complicated. And because I'm such a perfectionist, I'm like, oh no, I have to get this guy's system of self-help down. And then what happened was I was more stressed out about following this plan of self-help than what the result was supposed to be from that. I was getting more and more of a complex, right? Until you read enough of those and you realize they're all saying the same thing, even if the strategy is not the same. They need whatever is in your head that makes you think you can or can't do something, or whatever's in the way. You need to get rid of that by finding a strategy that works for you. And once you have that strategy, you don't need self-help anymore, because the strategy allows you to overcome adversity. What you need is a principle-based way of dealing with shit. You don't need a wishy-washy method for this thing and then another wishy-washy method for that. What you need is to find, like, what are your principles? What are the things you want? What are the things you will not bend on? And then use that as a problem-solving guide for the shit that life throws in front of you. And once you have that, you don't need to keep reading those books. Because there are a couple self-help books that I think are really great.
Okay.
And I've recommended them to people that I'm like, this book is really going to help this person. And I recommend it to them, and they read it, and they're like, oh, yeah, it was great. It was really, really great. And the following week, I find them reading another self-help book. And I go, oh, you didn't get it. I'm not telling you that this book is the solution to all of your problems. But let's say, for example, this one book I recommend to them gives you a template to move forward. And if you follow that, you can make adjustments along the way and find the way that works for you. And they just consumed it. They're like, okay, I got the idea, that now on to the next thing. And then what you realize is they're not applying anything they're learning. They think it's just a cumulative effect of having read enough of those books. Whereas in reality, you just find one good one and follow it. And it doesn't matter if there's another one that is 15% better, but you haven't read it yet, all right? That difference is not worth waiting until you find that one that's marginally better in the meantime, when you should be trying to improve your life right now. And perfection, all right, is the mother of procrastination. If you're trying to do it perfect and you want everything to be absolutely perfect, you will never freaking do anything, and you will never apply anything because you're afraid of making mistakes. Mistakes is how you learn. Oh, yeah. All right. And so Bruce was someone that he read self-help books, but he also applied them. Like his famous quote, which is not really his, knowing is not enough, you must apply. And that's the problem with self-help. People just keep consuming it, thinking that eventually they'll find the right one, even though they've read 15 books, and any of those 15 books could have got them on course to fix their lives. But they're still going, no, because they're literally waiting for the book to do it for them. And that's where you fail. So Bruce obviously was read a lot of Krishnamurti, although Krishnamurti is not really self-help. Ultimately all knowledge is self-help, I suppose, but I wouldn't label Krishnamurti as self-help. But he definitely read Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, because he had his famous definite chief aim, like I, Bruce Lee, will be the highest paid superstar by the year 1982 or whatever, and will be paid a sum of blah, 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 blah. And then he wrote like the check to himself. That is actually a template in the book Think and Grow Rich, which is about like you have to have a goal, and you have to manifest it and make it so real in your mind that everything you're doing every day is to get to that goal. Now, nowadays, we might have better or smarter ways of looking at that, but if you just followed that, you would already have a principle that you're following. Or the one guy reads it and goes, okay, that's interesting, throws the book away and then goes on to the next one, and then gain nothing from that one book. So by having a goal in mind, you say, okay, like in 10 years, I want to retire, right? And I'm going to retire at, the year 2032. And so you recite this to yourself all the time. So everything you do every day is like, is what I'm doing today going to help me achieve that goal? Now, what you might find is 3 years from now, you might want to change that goal. You might say, I don't want to retire in 10 years. I want to retire in 8.
Oh,
or you might say, I still want to retire in 10 years, but after that, I want to do something else, right? So you can adjust course along the way. Nothing says that you have to now follow this thing for the rest of your lives. But if you have something to go for, then you can start. And it doesn't have to be perfect. And that was Bruce Lee's definite chief aim, which is from Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. And that is a fantastic book. I read it. I thought it was helpful. But, I have goals, and whether that's from originally reading that book or not, I don't know. But the concepts are in there, and I don't read that much self-help. You know what I'm reading right now?
What's that?
I'm reading a book about myths about the FBI. It's like 20 myths that Hollywood has perpetuated and what the real story. Like, I read geeky stuff like that, like just interesting shit.
Yeah.
But I don't need to read Tony Robbins or any of that kind of stuff, because all of those things are saying the same thing. Just find one good one and do that. And don't think you have to read 10 of those things.
Man.
It's all the same.
Wow.
All right.
Wowie. Okay, Axel Stone is next.
That's what's up.
Axel Stone is asking a question. Any luck contacting Stallone's people? I'm feeling Sylvester Stallone.
Feeling Sylvester Stallone. Yeah, we contacted his peeps. Yeah, they're all for it. We'll probably have them on next week. All right, next question.
JKD Charleston.
That's what's up.
Sifu Alex showcasing some mad verbal Tai Chi skills. Question. Do we really know who Drizzen is? Could it be Beardy Incognito? P.S. Dre, thanks for the shout out.
Could Drizzen be Beardy Incognito? I don't know. Beardy is not he's not coherent enough.
No.
You
think so?
Yeah, I think Drizzen, he watches the podcast. Sometimes he even knows facts about the podcast during the recording of an episode that hasn't come out yet.
That hasn't even come out
Beardy
yet.
is not capable of that type of introspection. He just kind of wings it and makes shit up. He looks at photos and makes shit up. Drizzen...
He's a different creator.
Yeah. To put it in a very New York way, he knows some shit.
Yeah.
All right.
I think Drizzen might be from New York.
He's definitely from New York.
You know.
You heard his accent on that video when you slapped him?
True.
He was very New York.
He was super New York.
Super New York. All right, next question.
You know, it was strange. I was at work yesterday.
Oh.
And
here we go.
My job is a warehouse guy, right?
Yeah.
And part of the job is to move tons and tons of furniture.
Uh-huh.
And load trucks up with furniture. But it's a very systematic way. And it's all, listed, everything, every customer, blah, blah, blah. And you can't f it up. If you f it up, or if you mess it up.
Language.
If you mess it up.
Jesus.
You're doing something really wrong. But one of the customers' name was Harry Drizzen. And it made me wonder, is he coming after me?
Is he stalking you? He found out where you work.
Yeah.
You better lock your doors, man.
But I told all my
close your
coworkers.
windows. Hide your kids, hide your wife.
Yeah. I told my coworkers, I said, yo, look out for this guy. And I showed them the video.
Right.
We got to look out for this guy. If
gotta
you
look
see
out
this
for
guy, let me know.
Call the cops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he's after me.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right, what do we got next?
All right, next up we got Christian Creasy.
That's what's up.
Okay. Hell no. Definitely not the Iron Fist from the Netflix series, the one in the comic book. All right. Question.
Oh, because we were trashing that Iron Fist series at some point, right?
At some point. I like how these sometimes start. They just out of nowhere, right?
Yeah, because they're specific to the episode, and we might not get to it for a month or two, and we're like, this dude's coming in hot, and I don't even remember what we were talking about.
It's the best part. Have you ever thought about doing more WT demos like you did before? Those were very good, and I know it definitely helped improve my Gansao Ganda. Interesting.
So I assume he's talking about like my Howcast series where I kind of show that technical stuff. No, I mean, that was very early on. That was shortly after I left Sifu Learning's organization. They contacted me. We did all these like quick little how-to things. It's my D-level material. And I don't plan on doing that stuff because there's nothing more thankless than teaching people for free on YouTube. If people want to learn Wing Chun from me, they can come online. I do the private classes through Zoom, or you can come here to New York, or you can do an immersion course in Orlando. But teaching Wing Chun for free on YouTube is thankless, all right? Because it's just, why, all right? Like the Joker said, if you're good at doing anything, why do it for free, all right? So, no. And again, the whole purpose of this podcast was not just a platform for me to go, well, let's explain what Bong Sao is about and use this as a bully pulpit to kind of cram the way I do Wing Chun down everyone's throat. This is about having discussion. But obviously, if people want to learn from me, look, all the links are in the description below all of these episodes, whether it's for my immersion course or training with us in New York or doing Zoom private training. If you're already a Wing Chun practitioner and you want me to take a look at what you're doing and you got a partner maybe and you want we can do some corrections, I can give you some ideas. I can do all of that stuff online. That's not a problem. But I don't teach for free. That's pointless.
One thing I did love about the Howcast series was the front thrust kick.
Yeah.
Front thrust kick, craziness. Jerry D. Man. Okay.
You sound like Batman villain names.
Love the show. I learned a lot about the history of various martial arts, among other things. Question: if you could do a remake of Warriors 2 and Prodigal Son, who would you cast as the main characters for each of the movies? As a martial arts movie buff, it would be interesting to hear your take.
Wow, that's a great question. So a remake of two classic films, especially Prodigal Son, in my opinion, is the better of the two. And I feel that Prodigal Son was perfectly cast, with Lam Jingying as Leung Yitai and Frankie Chan as the villain, and Yun Bu as young Leung Chan, and obviously Sammo Hung as Wong Wao Bo. Very difficult to top that kind of casting with a modern actor because I don't know if you've looked around, but the new generation, I mean, we when you looked at the Hong Kong film industry in the 70s and 80s, you had just so many kung fu actors that were capable of doing so many different types of roles, so many different types of styles, and with different looks, and big guy, strong guy, this guy, that guy. And now you have like a couple names of people who do martial arts, obviously like Donnie Yen, and you still have a few of like the old...
Would you get some MMA guys that can act?
For a remake of Prodigal Son or Warriors 2? No. Unless it was a modern retelling of the story, like okay, we're not bound by, we're not telling a story of something that happened in Qing Dynasty China. We are taking Prodigal Son and making it into a modern action movie with the same story, but it's a modern action movie. Now, the story in Prodigal Son's amazing. I mean, basically, Leung Chan is a young martial arts enthusiast, but his father's very rich, and his father doesn't want to see him get hurt. So his father always has his assistant pay off his opponents to lose, right? And he has two martial art instructors, one played by Lei Hoi Sang, who will teach him, but basically they're just coddling his ego. Oh, you're doing so great. Oh, you're so good. Oh, you're so good. And then so he thinks he's really good. And every time he squares off with someone, his assistant very quickly pays them off to lose. So he's basically surrounded by people who are making him think that he's really good at martial arts. But the reason why his father does this is because his father cares for him. It might be misguided. And his father doesn't want to see him get hurt. And then you have another Prodigal Son played by Frankie Chan, who is from nobility. But the difference is he actually has fighting ability, and he's really, really good. But he also has these two assistants who kind of scope out and check out his opponents beforehand. Now, the difference is that Frankie Chan's character actually can beat the ass of most of the people. But when they see Leung Yi-tai, played by Lam Ching-ying, they're like a little worried, right? And and of course, if their guy was going to lose, they would probably do something like shank him or whatever.
Right.
But luckily in their first exchange, luckily for Frankie Chan's character, Lam Ching-ying gets an asthma attack and then has to stop, right? But basically it's a tale of two prodigal sons. And then when Leung Jan finds out very harshly that all of his martial arts skills are a sham, he then begs to be taught by Leung Yi-tai. And then Leung Yi-tai is a very reluctant instructor until eventually he does teach him, and then he learns Wing Chun, and then he later learns from his other kung fu uncle, Wong Wah Bo, and then, then the rest of the film kind of continues, right? You could do a modern retelling of that. Of even like using MMA or, where like all of his enemies all of his opponents are paid off. And then he finally finds out he can't do shit. And then he goes and he learns or something like that. Like you could do that, right? But if you were going to do it, if you were going to do a remake, a classic remake, rather than a modernized reboot of the story, and I'm looking around the current Hong Kong or Chinese martial arts actor landscape, you can't do it. You can't remake that movie because that movie was made without CGI. You had actual acrobatics. You had Lam Ching-ying actually doing those flips and somersaults over that flaming flag. Who are you going to find to do that? A gymnast? Can that gymnast also do martial arts? No. But back in those days, those guys could do all of that. Wow. So
it's a different school.
Were you going to do a modern version with CGI and all that stuff? It doesn't have the same charm. You cannot remake it. It would just be a steaming pile of dog shit. Both of those films. It would just be everything you've seen before. CGI kung fu, very slickly shot. We've seen that a million times. The actors are not really doing those things, so you're not invested in it. Kung fu films are dead. Everything that comes out of China and Hong Kong now in terms of martial arts is garbage. It's just all garbage. I can't even tell. I've not watched a new Jackie Chan movie since 2005.
Oh, damn.
I'm going to watch any of that stuff. I don't want to watch that stuff. It's not the same. It's over. It's over. Those films are over.
Man.
It's done. It's dead.
Oh, well.
Next question.
All right, next up we got Ken Hong. Oh, Hoang.
Okay.
Have you seen the interview where Chung said Bruce took steroids? Have you seen this interview?
You talking about William Chung? Who's Chung? There are a lot of Chinese named Chung.
It's a Chung.
Chung. It's actually pronounced Chung with a J in real life.
Chung.
Right? But they always spell CH. Well, so I don't know. What Chung are we talking about? All right.
Yeah.
William, no, I haven't. All right.
Okay.
And also, William Chung moved to Australia when he was like 18.
Yeah.
Which is around the time Bruce Lee moved to America. And they exchanged some letters. But from what I understand, they never actually met face to face again. So what would William Chung's opinion on whether Bruce was using what value would that be? All right. Imagine you knew someone famous until you were, but they weren't famous, but you knew that person around the time you were 18. And then that person moved to another country, became super, super famous, and died. And you never saw them again. The fact that you knew them back when they were 18 does not qualify you to say everything that was going on in their lives during a time period where you never even saw them. Mm-hmm. So, people like, I never met Bruce Lee. I never even coexisted in the same timeline as Bruce Lee, all right? But when I talk about him, I try to talk about stuff that has been mentioned by primary sources. William Chung would be a secondary source at best about anything that happened to Bruce Lee after he left Hong Kong. He would not be a primary source other than what Bruce wrote in his letters. But anything else, that's just speculation.
Okay.
But again, I know since he just said Chung, I don't know, perhaps he thinks the surname Chung is very common surname in Chinese, right?
Yeah.
So there are many actors. We're talking about
Bolo.
We talk about Hawkins Chung. It's the same Chung, right? So no, the Bolo is Yang. Bolo Yang.
No, but I'm just saying he has his name Chung. He's just one name guy.
Oh yeah.
Bolo
like
style.
Madonna. All right.
Yeah.
Who's that guy who sang Rico Suave?
Yeah.
What was his name?
Names.
Huh?
His name, Rico Suave.
Because that was the name of his song, but everyone
Geraldo.
Yeah, that's right. He was also a one name guy. Because everyone's like, oh no, that dude's Rico Suave. No, that was the name of his song. He's not Rico Suave. That doesn't make any sense.
He called him Rico Suave. That's right.
Suave.
Oh, man.
All right, next question.
Mike Bowman.
Here we go.
All right. That's a two-name, though. We got to get more one-namers up in here. Thank you for the great podcast.
You're welcome.
I'd love to hear you expound on Jun Ma sometime if possible. Wing Chun seems to be in the extreme minority in its teaching of heel pivoting, most lineages. But unless the floor and footwear allow, it seems practical. Boxing, Taekwondo, JKD, Kali, etc., all teach movement primarily generalization on the balls of the feet. Even the saying put them on their heels means to surprise to the point of arresting ability to perform. Is it maybe for developing body unity and not for application? And if it is truly a better way, why haven't other styles adopted it? Thank you.
I'm from one of the lineages that doesn't put the weight on the heel, so I have nothing to say about that. All right, like someone explaining to you how something is done, and that's literally not how you do it at all. So I had to sit through that. I don't know. Why would you put your weight on your heels? It's the least athletic thing you can do.
Least.
Sorry.
The total, yeah.
Yeah, it's not how we do it.
It's horseshit.
No, it's just, I can't say it's horseshit. I mean, maybe that people who do that have a justification for it, right? But that's not how we weight our foot, and that's not how we move. And again, this podcast is not it's not a platform for me to teach Wing Chun. If you want to learn how I do things, you can definitely, there are methods and avenues to do that, but it's on me to say this method is no good or that method is good or whatever. But I'm from a lineage that does not advocate putting your weight on your heels for obvious reasons. We don't turn on the heels for obvious reasons. So I have nothing to say. I can't comment on that.
Maybe he assumes that we put our weight on the heels.
Yes, but that assumption is wrong. So I can't, people, it would be like you driving an SUV right now, right? And it would be like, yo, Dre, why do you only drive station wagons? And you're like, well, I don't drive. No, why do you only drive station wagons? And like, how are you going to answer that? You can't answer that.
Okay.
All right. Last one more question.
You sure?
Yeah.
No.
That's all we got time for.
No.
Yes.
Mo Howard.
All right.
Mo Howard. Man. Sure we don't got time for another? Just finished this episode on Spotify. Great episode, as they all are. I'm glad you touched on Dragon, the Bruce Lee story again. Fun movie with great fight scenes. And a cameo from Nancy Kwan is worth the price of admission by itself. But the history was total bullshit.
Not
what
total.
part?
I mean, it was about a dude named Bruce Lee. They got that right.
What part of the film did you dislike the most? For me, it was the demon element.
I have not watched Dragon, the Bruce Lee story in a dog's age. All right. I remember it was on TV like a few years ago. And I was like on the couch with my wife, Carol, and I never had subjected her to watch that film before. But I had mentioned it before, and I'm like, oh, hey, this is that movie that they made in America about Bruce Lee. And then so we watched some parts of it, and she was just horrified. I mean, because
of the demon scene?
No, we didn't even watch that much, but just wow. It is, again, another Hollywood portrayal of Chinese people. And she was just like, what is this? I mean, she's not a Bruce Lee expert by any stretch of the imagination, but she, being around me for as long as she has, she knows a thing or two about Bruce Lee.
Okay.
And so, like, for her, she's like, what is this crap? I'm like, this is what Americans imagine Hong Kong and all this shit to be like, right? So, but I haven't seen it in a long time. I mean, the portrayal of Yip Man pissed me off. Like the English-speaking Yip Man who later practiced with a Tai Chi sword. And, spouts off some kind of very Western-sounding philosophies. So,
I gotta see that. There's only a few scenes that pop into my head.
I don't know. The movie does not live in my head rent-free that much. So I don't really have I would have to watch it again to find out what I don't like about it. Just collectively, the whole movie's kind of annoying.
Man.
Yeah.
All right. We have one more?
I guess, man.
Oh, no. All right. Next up, we got Drizzen. And he's asking a hybrid hypothetical. What the hell does that mean?
Hybrid hypothetical. What the I don't know. Are you and him cool? I mean, you slapped him in the face.
He tried to Instagram me.
Instagram
after
you?
that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Like the night after.
Weird.
Yeah.
Isn't your
Strange.
IG public?
I know, but
But you watch like a hawk, like who's on there,
slipped
right?
into my DMs.
He slipped into your
Yeah,
DMs.
yeah.
Was
Randomly.
sending you nudes or whatever, right? Is it weird because he looks kind of like you? That was the thing we
That
never
was the
really
weirdest
realized.
thing.
Yeah.
That was the
You guys
weirdest
have like
part.
very similar facial features.
But he has really, really terrible hair.
Oh yeah, that's right. Fluffy.
It's a fluffy hair. He has a weird hairstyle. I couldn't pull that off. Anyway, he's asking a hybrid hypothetical, which I don't even know what this means, but I'll read it and see what happens. It's strange because Mikey Deane's not here.
I know. To
And
say things
he-
like "shocker."
Right. Shocker.
Yeah. Or like whenever we make some kind of British or Australian or wherever the hell he's from
Anything.
joke,
Yeah.
then we always get the anger from back there,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But we
yeah.
can talk also. He's from Australia, isn't he?
He's from
Or New
Austria.
Zealand. Austria. I can never get the two straight.
Something like that.
Do you remember Dumb and Dumber?
I do.
The opening scene?
Yeah.
He's in the limousine
Yeah.
and he's driving and he goes all the way to the back to speak to that hot chick and puts the window down as if he's the passenger, but he's the driver. And then he's like, "That's a very lovely accent you have. Where's it? New Jersey?" And she's like, "Austria."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, put another shrimp on the barbie." So seen. Reminds me so much of Mikey Deane. We still don't know where he's
It's a
from.
great video
Right.
with Iggy Azalea.
Yeah.
And there's a bit, I forget who I think he's talking with, I think she's being interviewed by, damn, I can't remember for the life of me, but it is so good.
Yeah.
So good.
Scottish. Mikey Deane's Scottish. That's right.
Scottish.
Yeah. Irish.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, anyway, the hybrid hypothetical. Hey, dude, what happened up there was uncalled for. I don't know what he's referring
Oh,
to.
is he talking about when you
I
slapped
don't know.
him?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
He came in and he said a joke about me, but you thought that joke was funny at first.
No, I didn't.
Until I gave you that Jada Smith side eye, and then you decided to finally man up and
No,
slap the shit out of
That's
him.
not what happened.
Oh, it's not?
No,
I'm
but-
pretty sure we have videographic evidence
I'm
about
in the
that.
middle of reading.
Okay, let's see.
Anyway, that was uncalled for, but you know what? I still love you guys, and I'm over it. My face is healed, and I'm happy about just getting up there to the school and saying hello, even though I wasn't in
He
the
called
best
me the
mood.
Kung Fu Chicken, the KFC.
I remember. I was
He
there.
had nothing but disrespect. Now you
It
thought
was
it was
total
funny. No, you thought it
it
was
was
funny.
total
Yeah, no, I get it.
disrespectful.
No, I get it.
It
You
was
laughed at
totally
first.
disrespectful.
If you guys don't know what we're talking about, you can go to Instagram, watch the video of Dre
Yeah.
slapping Dyson.
So he's saying, yeah. Anyway, had Dre not caught me off guard, I would have bust his ass. What do you mean? I didn't even catch him off guard. I walked straight to him.
He had his hands down from what I could tell.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And you didn't, it wasn't even like a non-telegraphic strike. You pulled that thing all the way back.
Yeah. Super, like,
Yeah.
like
From started in New Mexico.
up here, though.
Yeah. Went all the way around normal Mexico.
I literally showed him.
Yeah. Past
From
Cuba.
the heavens
Right.
above.
All the way to Jersey.
Yeah. Anyway, let me finish reading this fucking jacket. I'm not.
Yeah. I can
pissing
tell
me
you're a
off.
little pissed now.
Pissing me off.
You
right
feel
now.
like he got off too easy.
He bust my ass.
Yeah. He said he would bust your ass.
If I didn't
Well, he
didn't
did
catch him
kinda-
off guard,
He did kind of look like he was in shape. Maybe if you didn't catch him off guard, maybe the two. I would love to see you and Drizzen have a fight.
not gonna happen. I'm not even gonna entertain that. But let me finish reading. So, off guard, I would whatever. Because he's a punk bitch.
Wow. Wow, them be fighting words. So far, what's the hybrid hypothetical? I don't even see it.
I'm trying to get past like all this great, but I still love him. He's still one of the coolest co-hosts in a podcast, and
one of the coolest co-hosts. Yeah.
Anyway,
second only to Mikey Deane.
My question is, if Bruce Lee were alive today, do you think he would have an anonymous YouTube account to troll people?
You mean like have a fake YouTube name just to troll people?
Yeah.
Nah. That's not manly. Bruce wouldn't do that. And that's all I got to say about that. Okay, everyone. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Kung Fu Genius. As always, don't forget to subscribe to the Kung Fu Genius. Hit that bell for notifications. Like this episode. And if you have any comments and questions you want me to address in a future episode, go ahead and write them below. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.
Word is I'm a Kung Fu genius. Technique speaks for me, not lineage. Forget Jet Li, cause I'm the one. Many call me Sifu, but to you I'm Si-Gung. And I produce masters. You surpassed us. Your Kung Fu stiffer than corpse and caskets. City Wing Chun is the house I built. Violate the gate and your blood gets spilt. Alex Richter, always the victor.
That's what's up. Okay, so
That's what she said.
take it easy. Andrew Lin in the house.
You know who he is, right?
Is that our first question, though? I'm pretty sure I highlighted the banger. That was the whole point.
Devin Harper.
All right.
So Andrew Lin.
Andrew Lin, go
You
ahead
have
and
to-
edit that. The first
you gotta-
question is going to be Devin Harper. All right.
All right, peoples. All right, peeps. All right, peeps. All right, peoples. All right, pa. All right, yeah. All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius. All right, peoples. All right, man. All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be answering all sorts of hot nonsense from YouTube. Lots of gems, lots of taxi driving seafoods, clams, and shrimp driving taxis. All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, Why you shaking your head? Why you shaking your head, man? All right, peeps. On today's episode, all sorts of hot nonsense from YouTube. Lots of gems. The genius will be answering all sorts of hot nonsense. What you laughing at, man? What you laughing at, man? All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be answering all sorts of hot nonsense from YouTube. Lots of gems, lots of this, lots of that. Checking out the body of a believable back.